Hey guys, you are watching the In Third Person comic book show. This is the very first episode. So glad to be here. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. If you've never been to that website, inthirdperson.com, before, it is a website where I create content, write posts, make videos, primarily about video games, but I'll write about some other things as well, such as board games. As you can see, I've got a whole bunch in the back over here, and some stuff in my personal life, and also comic books, which is going to be the focus of this particular show going forward. So, my background with comic books. I have not been reading comic books for very long at all. Only started a couple of months ago. And to be honest with you, up until then, I always had this perception that comic books were for nerds. Who reads comic books, right? That's a stupid thing that nerds do. Of course, meanwhile, I've been playing video games for all my life, and there's a lot of other nerdy things that I do, but I always just had this perception in my mind that comic books were for nerds. So I just did not do it. And then a couple of maybe not a couple of months ago, but about a year ago, where I started to think, well, maybe I should check out these comic books. I said, where the heck do I start? Like, so many years have passed in the medium, and decades of issues have run. So I like the Walking Dead TV show. That comic's over 10 years old. X-Men is a cartoon I loved as a kid. That comic book's over 50 years old. Batman is my all-time favorite comic book character. Batman's over 75 years old with thousands of issues under his belt across all sorts of different series. Where the heck do you start? And so, I mean, this episode, I wanted to cover, well, different ways to start reading. I can share how I started and some other recommendations on how to get into this if you're not already reading comic books. So, where to start? I would say, if there are any franchises that you're already interested in through other mediums, start there. So I'll pull up three examples: The Walking Dead, X-Men, and Batman. I really like those three, and so I said, let's start here. And so, where do you go from there? I mean, you don't necessarily have to start with issue 1, because in certain cases that's going to be really hard to track down. But the closer you can get to issue 1, the better. I would say in the case of The Walking Dead, that's actually really easy to do. At least if you're going to go with the trade paperback version. You are looking for The Walking Dead Volume 1, Days Gone By. This is really easy to find at pretty much any bookstore. It's not very expensive, and you can just start reading The Walking Dead right now. As for X-Men, Batman, and a whole bunch of other superheroes, particularly from DC or Marvel, I would say try and start with the very first issue in the current continuity. So, what does current continuity mean? Maybe back up a little bit. So, in 2011, DC did a reboot on the entire DC universe. So, all of the stuff that came before it sort of kind of doesn't count anymore. It depends on each series and what they kept and what they didn't. So, in the case of Batman, let me find that book. I had that here just now. Ah, here it is. In the case of Batman, you are looking for Batman Volume 1, The Court of Owls. So this is the New 52. You can see it. All the new DC ones have the New 52 over here at the top. Easy way to track it. You can find that anywhere. With X-Men, I would track down All New X-Men. There are a lot of X-Men books out there. There's All New X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, just X-Men, which doesn't really have any dudes in it. There's X-Men Legacy, so on and so forth. I would say go with the Marvel Now. So, Marvel Now, All New X-Men. Everything kind of revolves around here. So this is where you would start. Now, I guess I've shown you two different formats. There's trade paperback, and there's the issues. Like, which way do you want to collect? I guess it depends on what your priority is. So, for me, I personally prefer this. I like the trade paperbacks because you get a whole bunch of issues in one neat and tidy book. There's usually 5 to 7 issues in each one. They're cheaper than buying all of the books at once or buying all of the issues separately. And especially now as you get older, like this issue cost me $10, and this for like 7 issues was like 15. So there's a great savings to catching up through trade paperback. And also just like the format. I don't like having to store these on a shelf. But comic collectors, the people that are really into it, probably want the individual issues for the collector value. And also the fact that these things usually come out a couple of months to a year after these issues have run. So if you want to be on the pulse of the whole thing, you'll probably want the issues. If you just want to catch up for the time being, definitely go with trade paperbacks. So current continuity, trade paperbacks or comics, that up to you. I would say start with that. I know there's a lot of other classic stories, but the farther you go back in time, I find that the harder it can be to appreciate some of the writing and what was done at the time. Let me give you an example. This one, graphic novel, Batman The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, often considered the greatest Batman story of all time. It features a 50-year-old Bruce Wayne coming back to be Batman after a decade of not being Batman. And there are some super awesome moments in this book, but I don't think it's aged particularly well. Like, there are a lot of news bits here where the writing is just very heavy-handed and it hasn't aged particularly well. A lot of panels are very small with a lot of text, and in certain ways it just does not read as well as it did at the time. Not saying that it's not entertaining or that you can't get anything out of it, but for the modern reader, you probably want to start with the current stuff and then work your way backwards, so at least you have a grounding of comic books and what you enjoy, what you don't, and then you can look at something like this with that historical context in mind. Another way you can try catching up on comic books, though this is a little more expensive, is to go with the omnibus route. So Marvel Now, their omnibus, which has issue 1 of everything in the relaunch. So there were like 30 something comics issue 1s in here. So X-Men, X-Men Legacy, Fantastic Four, the Avengers, all of those guys, and the new 52 book, which is even bigger, 52 issues of all the DC relaunches here as well. These run, I mean, I got mine for half price, so this was like $150 for both. They regularly would have been about $300. I mean, most people probably won't want to do that, but it's an option there. Like, me reading these 2 books kind of gave me a general idea of the entire modern comic book superhero landscape, and for that, it was worth it to me. I got to see what the deal was with the Green Lantern and Superman and some other characters that I probably wouldn't have given a damn about. And in some cases, well, in most cases, I was just like, I don't care about any of these anyway. But in certain cases, it opened my eyes up to some franchises that ended up being really good. Like Wonder Woman. Dude, if you're not reading Wonder Woman, go read Wonder Woman. It's awesome. And I wouldn't have even given it a chance if it wasn't for that omnibus. So for that, I'm thankful. And for some reason, my Xbox just turned on. Let's turn that off. I don't know why that happened. There's a couple other things I missed. If you want to read superhero stuff and you kind of want the most bang for your buck, you might want to try a team book such as the Justice League or the Avengers, where you get a taste of a whole bunch of different superheroes, get an idea of what they're like, and let's say you really like Aquaman, then you could try reading more Aquaman after that. I will say, side note, the issue 1 of New 52 Aquaman, awesome. If superhero stuff isn't your thing, I would recommend checking out Image Comics. They do a lot of great stuff. They have some superhero stuff in-house as well. They also do The Walking Dead, so all that stuff with Rick Grimes. That's all there. Image Comics has that. And another one I would recommend starting off with is Saga. So this is basically a sci-fi romance drama comic about two people in love who are in rival armies and they really shouldn't be together, and it's super awesome. And one of the great things about this, they come in trade paperbacks, which are very easy to find. They're up to volume 3 right now. And what I love about Image is that they do a lot of reprints on their issues. So you can see I got this one for only $1. So you could try out a lot of Image comic stuff for really cheap. Just test it out, see if you like it, and go from there. So I think that wraps up this episode of the In Third Person Comic Book Show. I am really glad that I got into comic books because there's just so many great stories and adventures that are only in the comics that I used to think that TV shows would cover them, that movies, the cartoons, and really there's still very much a place for this type of entertainment that's really great. So I'm really glad that I jumped in, and hopefully with this video, maybe you will make the jump as well if you haven't yet. So those are just a couple of comics that I'd recommend, but there's definitely more out there. For more comic book stuff, you could check out my site, inthirdperson.com. I've written a bunch of reviews and whatnot on there for a bunch of different comic books, from Spider-Man, a lot of Batman stuff, a ton of X-Men stuff, and some other things as well, like Morning Glories and Sex Criminals, and a couple of other things as well. So you can definitely check out the site for more comic book stuff like that. And if you're into video games and board games, I've got a ton of content on inthirdperson.com there as well. So until next time, thank you for watching the comic book show, and hopefully we'll see you again later. Peace.